Good morning, and welcome to our last state and federal programs directors meeting for the 24-25 school year. Can't believe we're here already. I'm Adrienne Balcazar, and I would like to introduce the LCAP State and Federal Programs Unit. Joining us today from the team is Debbie Cano,
Hello.
Helen Choi,
Good morning.
Laurel Estrada,
Good morning, everybody.
Augustine Garcia,
Hello, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday.
Rachel Garcia,
Hello, everyone.
Jeannie Keith,
Good morning.
and Anita Lomeli.
Good morning.
And also joining us is our support staff, April Grease
Good morning.
and Susanna Mendoza.
Morning.
Great. To access today's presentation, we ask you to click on the link in the chat, and this will take you directly to the slides. If you use the link at the top of the slide, this will take you to the Canvas page. The presentation can be accessed through the icon as shown here, and then also you can find the recording and the Q&A. Today's topics for this meeting will be the CalPads and Sunbucks update, Prop 28 update, the Khan app spring release update, FPM update, and the LCAP update. We ask you to place your questions in the chat box, and we will answer any simple questions if we can. We will follow up with a written response in the Q&A that will be emailed to each of you. We are recording again today. We are recording today's training, and we will be posting this on our webpage. And now we are very fortunate to have Evan Bartelheim from the Accountability and Data Literacy Unit. He's going to give us some very important updates on CalPads and Sunbucks.
Good morning, everyone. Happy to join you. Happy end of the year. I'm going to give you like Adrian just mentioned, I've got a few things I want to drop from the accountability and data world that I think are really relevant to state and federal program directors. First, I wanted to let you know about some shifts for those of you who have responsibilities that may include accessing or analyzing data for the LCAP, your local indicators, or the dashboard. I just wanted to let you know that CalPads now has 2 reports as well as an extract that will help you identify your LTELs based on the new accountability definition out of Ed Code 52052. So there's report 15.1 and 15.2. These are your cohort reports, which allow you to review your data for your graduating cohort. It includes some of the college and career indicators. So that'll get you some insight into who your cohort LTELs may be. And these can be kids who are English learners and LTELs in 9th grade and were reclassified, but they still, for the purposes of the graduating cohort, are considered LTELs. And that data will show up in there. There's a filter in there. There's also this extract. It's the cumulative enrollment extract. It has a number of data points that include that are relevant to your LTELs, including the provisional LTEL start date. That's kind of the important one. And so what this will give you some insight, it's cumulative enrollment. So you may have had a student for a brief period in a window during the year who would have been classified as an LTEL and then even left. But if they, for any reason, if they were suspended or they had absences, they would be included in your chronic absenteeism rate or your suspension rate indicator. So it's another good resource. There's additional reports coming next year. This is a 2-phase approach to adding LTEL visibility to CalPads. And I just wanted to let you know about it. The second phase will be next year. You'll get some end-of-year reports, which will be probably the most powerful, but just for some of this preliminary view, it's pretty helpful. Next slide, please. And in that vein, since we're talking about LTELs, the other LTEL definition, the old definition from Ed Code 313.1 required that every year LEAs identify or notify parents of long-term English learners or at risk of becoming long-term English learner students. And to do that, they provide this file annually, and it's about to be released in your Student Online Accountability Record Status or SOARS system. And the person who has access to that generally is your dashboard coordinator, might also be a CalPads person. But this file should be coming out any day soon. They announced it a few weeks ago, and I haven't yet heard anything. And I would receive that notification since I'm the dashboard coordinator here at LACO. But you should get an email to notify you. So if you have any responsibilities for Title III, you'll definitely want to be on the lookout for this. Put this on your radar. Next slide, please. So I also want to talk about Sunbucks, and you may have heard this. It's bouncing around. Probably CalPADS people. There's a CalPADS Flash that came out, and certainly people in the nutrition services have been talking about it. But when I saw this, and we shared this it's been reported in a couple places. There's, like I said, CalPADS Flash, also in the most recent CalPADS regional meeting. It was a big topic of discussion. And I looked at it through the lens, who needs to know about this? I'm like, this is really going to have an impact on collection of data for LCFF. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. So first of all, what is the Sunbucks program? It used to be called Summer EBT. I guess technically it still is called Summer EBT. And it's designed to help low-income families find additional food sources over the summer. It amounts to about $120 per eligible student. So it's money that goes to a good place, right? So that's first thing to know. It's useful for kids. But there's a new collection form that's being put out there called the Universal Benefits Application. And this is required by the federal government. It meets the federal requirements for the Sunbucks eligibility. And it can be used to identify students who meet the income eligibility criteria for the unduplicated pupil count. So very important for your LCFF funding. State and federal program directors and LCFF coordinators can be really valuable assets in the outreach efforts to help families complete these forms. And in looking back, we had additional forms that came about when we started the Universal Lunch Program in California, and we had trouble collecting the National School Lunch Program forms. So we have the alternate income forms. And I know that many of you have been really instrumental in thinking of ways we can do outreach, because you want to make sure everybody who's eligible filled out one of those forms. So as I'm going to talk about, the form for the UBA is really critical, because the alternate income form is not going to be used for Sunbucks eligibility, and there will be parents who may miss out if it doesn't shift. But importantly, the requirements for the cafeteria funds don't allow cafeteria funds to be used for the collection of these. So I've heard some people say, well, who's responsible for this? The state hasn't weighed in. So don't expect that Nutrition Services is going to take this collection over. So if you want to make sure you have a really robust collection phase, I just am putting on your radar, because you may definitely want to check in and make sure that there's a plan in place to get the process going as early as possible, so you can maximize the number of students you have filling these forms out. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll just talk about what you need to know. So there's this terminology, streamlined certified. This is important to know, because this is makes it somewhat easier. So there are a lot of students. In fact, probably the majority of students are going to be streamlined certified for Sunbucks eligibility. These are students who are directly certified based on their participation in CalFresh, CalWorks, or Medi-Cal, or they're categorically eligible students. Those are students who are migrant, homeless youth, or foster youth. And for the most part, with the exception of homeless students, this information is coming down from the Department of Social Services into CalPADS. So you're not providing this. We do have to provide the homeless data into CalPADS locally, but everything else is being pushed in. So most of these kids are already going to be taken care of automatically. Next slide, please. The other thing to remember is this, as I mentioned, this alternate income form. This became very helpful, because when we had the Universal Lunch Program start, people were like, well, why would I need to fill out any form, right? So we have this super abbreviated form that was generally easy to get people to fill out. However, this form can still be used. And I did hear somebody say, oh, our CBO only wants to collect the alternate income form. And that can still be used, but keep in mind, parents won't be eligible. Parents won't, if they fill this out, would not then be eligible to collect that the Sunbucks for their students, right? So you might have some parents who are mad, like if they weren't sought out. When I heard that coming from a CBO, I was like pretty concerned. Like, you need to know that they need to fill this out. The National School Lunch Program application is still in play here at certain schools, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And this form can be used for not only the unduplicated pupil count, but also for Sunbucks eligibility, and it meets the federal meals eligibility. And then you have this new form that the CDE has created called the Universal Benefits Application, or UBA, and it also can be used for all three: unduplicated pupil count for LCFF, Sunbucks eligibility, as well as federal meals eligibility. Now, note, some people have asked, can we create our own form for electronic distribution as part of our enrollment process? Yes, you can do that. You just want to make sure you have all the forms. The form was fully vetted with the federal government that they created. So you want to have all the same forms so it meets all the criteria. Next slide. I just want to point out down at the bottom corner, you'll see there's this flash, relevant flash. I didn't include it here because I just yesterday at the CalPAS regional meeting, they noted that not only are they updating that flash in the next week, but it's going to be much clearer. And I would say I have a link in the slide, but this is all being drawn from the same flash. But this flash is going to be updated to be a lot more legible and understandable. So give it a week and then go to the link. But here's what you need to know about the UBA, this Universal Benefits Application. Who needs to fill it out? It's going to be a required form for those students who are not directly certified, so they didn't meet it through either the direct certification or categorical certification, and they are either enrolled at a CEP school or a Provision 2 school. Any students who are directly certified do not need to submit the UBA. They're going to be fine, okay? So, and any students who are enrolled at a standard counting and claiming school will still be able to just submit the National School Lunch Program form. Next slide. So here's kind of a breakdown. I think is pretty handy to look at. Just the regular how frequently you need to collect. So typically, our standard counting and claiming schools will fill out that National School Lunch Program form annually, and this will qualify those eligible students for not just the free and reduced price lunch, but also the SunBucks eligibility and can be used for LCFF. For any CEP schools, which is like over 70% of schools in California now, the UBAs will be the de facto form to fill out, and these would need to be collected annually for SunBucks eligibility, and like I mentioned before, can also be used for LCFF. And then for Provision 2 schools, during the base year, you still have to collect the NSLP forms, which can also be used for LCFF. And then in the non-base years, you would use the UBAs. And the reason this came, I think, to the attention of CalPAS people is there's this external data collection system, or called, well, it's EDCS, actually stands for Educational Data Collection System. And we're collecting a lot of things through it, including what else is going in there? The State Seal of Civic Engagement is being uploaded through there. So I think because it's a data thing, it's landed on the laps of CalPAS people, but it's definitely something that I think state and federal program folks need to know. Next slide, please. And this is just the quote from why annually, right? So this is from the CalPAS Flash, and just it sounds because we're not used to having to fill these forms out annually, right? If we have a CEP school, kind of the benefit was, oh, once you're identified as eligible, you shouldn't have to fill the forms out. But actually, for the purposes of collecting the SunBucks, the determination of eligibility has to be made annually. So it does add a little bit of extra burden, and I think that's maybe why the CBO is like reluctant to require this. I would note, however, there's now with the additional funding, one thing we didn't have with the collection of alternate income forms is incentive, right? If parents know that there's this $120 for their child upon filling this out, then they may be more incentivized to fill it out, and that's been the problem in getting accurate data for the last few years. So that should help. Of course, there's some reluctance in many cases to fill out additional paperwork right now. There's a lot of concerns, I think, about privacy and things, and that's something, like I said, you can still submit the AIF, you just wouldn't be eligible to collect the funding. Next slide, please. I think we just have a couple more and I'll be wrapping it up. So this just goes through the year. So actually for this upcoming summer, there are some LEAs, and hopefully yours is on the boat. We're trying to capture those kids, target those kids who weren't in that streamlined certified process, so we can capture that universal benefits application before they get out of school, so they can have their SunBucks early on. But if you can't get them now and you don't get them till later, as long as it's collected between July 1st and September 1st, they will get the eligibility for this upcoming summer, as well as the following summer, the 25-26, as long as it's if they're enrolled on Census Day. So this is a good reference. Again, this is taken from the CalPAS Flash, which I'll defer to later. And then final slide here. Let's see if there are any questions. These are all the resources. There is an excellent SunBucks webinar that's linked in here that gives a lot of details. There's SunBucks webpage by the CDE, as well as the Department of Social Services, the explanation of the UBA, and the CalPAS Flash. Like I said, it's coming out soon, an updated one. Importantly, if you have questions, the summer EBT email is there. And then there's this external for household inquiries from families, this phone number. So I see there's some questions. Let me see if I've got nothing, no questions there. That's it for me. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat and I'll make sure to get a follow-up to you. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you, Evan. Such great information. So now we're moving on to Prop 28 updates. So the CDE has updated their website with information and resources regarding the Prop 28 Arts and Music Funds. So on the bottom of the slide here, we've provided a link to that updated page. The updates that have been made are to the FAQs, and they've also provided webinar recordings with information about the requirements for the use of funds and reporting. And you'll also find a link to that reporting portal. The tabs on the page are the links to an abundance of resources to guide LEAs in understanding and using the funds. Next slide. The LEAs are required to provide an annual report to their governing board for their approval. After approval, LEAs are required to report this information to the CDE with the date of that approval. A template, as pictured on this slide here, with the reporting requirements is provided for LEAs, and there's a link here on the slide as well to this template. So when is this supposed to happen? The reporting window is actually already opened. It opened May 1st and it closes September 30th, 2025. We're providing this reminder now to encourage LEAs to plan accordingly and ensure that they do this within this timeline. If you don't, you risk losing funds, and we would hate to see that happen. Okay, now Rachel will share CalPAD's information.
Okay, and so the new Rachel is actually Anita. Thank you, Debbie. So the Consolidated Application Spring Release Update. Next slide, please. So as you're probably aware, the spring release of the Consolidated Application and Reporting System opened on May 1st. And LEAs have 2 months to submit and certify all required forms between the time the window opened and when the window will close, which will be on Monday, June 30th. Now, sticking to the dates within the yellow brackets will ensure that you and your LEA are golden and ready to enjoy the summer break. Now, for any LEA that has not certified all of the required forms, they will be contacted by the corresponding program office at CDE on a weekly basis, if not more often, to make sure that you get across the finish line. Once the system closes on August 15th, it will not be opened for any LEA nor for any reason. So in the spring release of the Con app, there are forms required for 3 fiscal years, 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26. And on this slide, you'll find the required forms for fiscal years 23-24 and 24-25. The forms required for fiscal year 25-26 are listed here in the yellow box, and it can get a little tricky to navigate the instructions for all of the forms. So the text box next to the blue star has a direct link to the CDE webpage where all of the instructions to each of the forms are housed. Now, also, please keep in mind that the LEA's application for funding must be board approved by your local governing board. We cannot stress enough how important it is for LEAs to begin completing and certifying the required forms for the 3 fiscal years. Sooner rather than later is always the best option when it comes to cards. Now, up next, Augustine is going to provide some reminders for required forms related to equitable services. Augustine?
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you, Anita. Good morning, everyone. So there's a requirement under ESSA, and it states that the results of the consultation process with nonprofit private schools shall be transmitted to the state ombudsman through the Con app annually during the CAR spring release, which, as Anita mentioned, is open right now. So let's talk about the required documentation for private school consultation. The LEA must maintain in its records and provide to the state educational agency a written affirmation signed by officials of each participating nonprofit private school. That written affirmation per ESSA must provide the option for private school officials to indicate their belief that A, meaningful consultation has occurred, B, timely and meaningful consultation has not occurred, or C, that the program design is not equitable with respect to eligible nonprofit private school children. You see the white codes there in blue, and those are the consultation codes that you'll enter in CARS when completing the nonprofit private school consultation page. So keep in mind, a lot of LEAs might ask, well, what happens if we choose code 4 because of private school officials' belief? Or if we choose code 2 because a private school never responded? Well, per CDE, there's no punitive action. It's just to note what the LEA and the state ombudsman can do to revise the process to make it timely and meaningful under the requirement of the law. Just remember to always have the correct evidence on file. And speaking of keeping the correct evidence on file, what happens when the private school officials don't provide that written affirmation with a reasonable period of time? Well, the LEA must forward that evidence and all evidence of attempts to the state ombudsman. As you can see here on the screen, examples of consultation can include certified mail receipts, email read receipts, and documented phone logs. And if during the course of your ongoing consultation, you, the LEA, disagrees with the views of the private school officials, then the LEA must provide those officials with a written explanation of the reasons for the disagreement. Okay, so let's take a look at how this looks in CARS. So the CARS consultation form captures or summarizes the 4 steps of the reporting process. Step 1 is the intent to participate. Did the consultation occur? Step 2 is your goal of reaching an agreement, your discussions, your ongoing meetings, etc. Step 3 is the documentation that you're maintaining, whether it's your intent to participate notices, your documents, your letters, your emails, your certified letters, meeting notes, call logs, or the written affirmation with their signature and their belief. And step 4 is reporting that belief of the nonprofit private school official. So now this sample that I have on the screen, it's ideal, right? It has all Ys and Y1s. But what about a scenario where perhaps an agreement wasn't reached, or we don't have a signed affirmation, or we have consultation and an agreement, but then the private school official believes that the program is not equitable? So attached to this slide is a link that'll take you to 4 different scenarios provided by CDE where this might occur and how to go about reporting it. Remember, there's no punitive action for choosing codes 2, 3, or 4. Just ensure that you're retaining all that documentation that shows your good faith attempts at establishing that productive working relationship that we discussed earlier. So here we see some screenshots of CDE's intent to participate and written affirmation. You can access these forms at the link provided on this slide. It's important to obtain a copy of the intent to participate form from each private school, whether or not they intend to participate in equitable services, and also include a deadline by which they need to respond. Districts are required to maintain in its records a written affirmation signed by each nonprofit private school to document that timely and meaningful consultation has occurred. Remember, private school officials must have the option to indicate their belief that timely and meaningful consultation has or has not occurred, and that the program designed for private school students is or isn't equitable. And to end this section, we've also included a sample consultation checklist with today's materials to assist you with this process. Basically combines all the steps and components shared in this section into a checklist format. And now I'll hand it off to our boss, Adrian, who'll be going over some FPM updates.
Thank you, Augustine. So today we're going to share the 25-26 CE instrument in case you haven't already received it. And we're going to focus on some new requested evidence, specifically for CE7 discipline practices. CE7, the purpose of this particular item in the CE instrument is to review and ensure that LEAs are implementing the equitable, non-discriminatory discipline practices, and also to address the disparities that affect underserved students. So if you have been FPM this year, you know that this was reviewed. The FPM instrument should be posted by the end of June on the CDE website, but there's the link here. We are providing you with a copy of the approved 25-26 instrument for compensatory education. So in looking at CE7 discipline practices, subunit 7.8 has been added to the 25-26 CE instrument. And this is regarding a certificated or classified employee that may refer a student to school administrators for appropriate and timely in-school interventions or supports from the list of other means of corrections for disrupting school activities. And so that's part one. Part two is a school administrator shall, within 5 business days, they must document the actions taken and place the documentation in the pupil's record to be available for access. So ensure that when you are looking at your discipline practices, that you are ensuring that you are aware of 7.8 that's been added. In looking at the actual evidence that's being requested this year, last year focused just on discipline policies, and next year we'll focus on the discipline policies, but also samples of student discipline records. So what's new this year is the charter school suspension and expulsion records. That's new. The discipline data request, that is new. Discipline practice policy self-review, expulsion records, involuntary transfer to continuation school records, records of in-school supports, and suspension notices. These are all new evidence that's going to need to be collected and housed for if you're selected for an FPM review, but also if this is just part of your process that you're going to have to add. So there's some best practices that CDE recommends. One is review the requirements for each of the sub-items in CE7. Also identify which documents reflect those requirements and make sure that you have all of those in place. Then check to see if there are policies and or rules that require revisions. And then if you have any questions, the TIMSO says to please reach out to them. And so we've placed their email and their phone number there for your convenience. And now the LCAP update.
Oh, excuse me. Thank you, Adrian. So as we have begun reading LCAP drafts, we wanted to provide some reminders for this year's LCAP development. It's important to remember that the goal analysis section is broken down into 4 prompts. In subsequent slides, we're going to take a closer look at prompt 3, but let's quickly review the others. Prompt 1 is simply the degree to which actions were implemented according to plan. For prompt 2, address spending that differed materially from planned budgets. Prompt 4 includes any changes to metrics, actions, or expected outcomes. Now let's take a closer look at prompt 3. This process map helps guide the work to develop a response to prompt 3. After reporting year 1 outcomes in the metrics section and identifying differences between baseline data and year 1 outcomes, complete a thorough analysis to determine whether the actions in each goal are working. Were they already successful in reaching the target, or are they on track to reach the target in year 3? Will they need to be changed based on that analysis? When those questions are answered, describe the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of the specified actions in making progress toward the goal during the 3-year LCAP cycle. For the purposes of this prompt, effectiveness means the degree to which the actions were successful in producing the desired result, and ineffectiveness means that the actions did not produce any significant or desired result. All actions must be included in prompt 3, but you may group them by action type or by metric to consolidate your narrative response. If it cannot be determined that an action has produced any significant or desired result, then the action must be identified as ineffective. LEAs are not limited to reporting effectiveness or ineffectiveness through metrics identified in last year's LCAP, they may also use additional measures of progress, including input from educational partners. Any action that's marked as a contributing action needs to have metrics identified in the increased and improved services section. Those metrics are to be used to determine effectiveness in improving outcomes for English learners, foster youth, and/or low-income students. It's important to note that since this is year 2 of the current 3-year LCAP cycle, even if an action is determined to be partially effective or ineffective in this year's plan, LEAs are only required to change actions after 3 years of implementation. Let's take a look at an example of a contributing action that as it is described in the increased or improved section. What metric or metrics are used to monitor effectiveness of actions 1.1 and 1.6? In this example, the LEA is using their attendance rate, which is identified as metric 1.4. They are also using feedback from educational partners regarding the effectiveness of the new attendance program. Now I'll hand it off to Helen so that she can tie together how all of this is documented in the LCAP.
So thank you, Laurel. So again, our question is, so where and how do we document this? So as Laurel mentioned, we're focusing on prompt 3 of the goal analysis section. So take a moment, having heard from Laurel, like what key ideas or elements would you include in your response? So here we have a sample response to the LEA-wide contributing action goal analysis prompt 3. Keep in mind that this isn't meant to be exemplary. Each LEA has unique needs and their data. So however, as we take a closer look at this sample, we will identify the key components that should be addressed in your own response. So let's consider these 4 guiding questions. Is the action clearly identified, individually or grouped? Is the statement for effectiveness or ineffectiveness clear? What evidence or data supports the description of effectiveness or ineffectiveness? And does the analysis address the specific student groups for whom the action is principally designed to support using the metrics from the increased or improved section? So let's find out. As we look here, we see the 2 actions, 1.1 and 1.6 highlighted in yellow in this response and in the increased and improved section. Each includes a brief description to help educational partners understand what the action entails. The degree of effectiveness is clearly indicated in blue, leaving no room for confusion. And in this example, the action is labeled as ineffective. It's important again to remember that in the second year of the 3-year cycle, LEAs are not required to modify or delete actions that have been identified as ineffective. So next, the degree of effectiveness here is supported by evidence and data indicated in the purple boxes. In this case, attendance rates are closely monitored along with student feedback, both which serve as a key data sources. And remember, today we're focusing on LEA-wide actions. So when discussing the effectiveness of these actions, the LEA must consider specific impact on where are 3 groups? English learners, low-income, and/or foster youth students. And this impact should be supported by the metrics referenced in the increased or improved section. As you can see in the boxes in the red, in the increased or improved table, the last column identifies the metric to monitor effectiveness. And in this case, it's metric 1.4. Keep that metric number in mind, and we'll connect it to attendance data. So tie this further, in the contributing actions table from the 24-25 plan, remember the effectiveness is speaking to your implementation and what happened this year in 24-25. You'll see the unduplicated student group that is specifically identified. The student group mentioned in this description should align with the ones listed in the table. In this sample, it's the low-income students. And remember metric 1.4? So let's go back to the measuring and reporting actions table. You'll see that metric 1.4 was highlighted in the increased or improved section. Here, we can review metric 1.4 along with the other data used to determine the effectiveness of this action. And this metric was aggregated specifically for low-income students. So data for both all students and low-income students were assessed to determine effectiveness. In this case, the action was deemed ineffective based on data. The outcome suggests that while the efforts were well-intentioned, they did not adequately make progress towards target results. So putting it all together, is the action clearly identified? Individually, in this case, it's grouped. Yes. Is the statement for effectiveness or ineffectiveness clear? Yes. What evidence or data supports the description of effectiveness or ineffectiveness? In this case, it's attendance data for all students and low-income students, as well as some student feedback. Does the analysis address specific student groups for whom the action is principally designed to support using the metrics from the increased or improved section? Yes, low-income students and their attendance data. And we hope this example helps you guide you in writing and analyzing your own responses to the prompt. So, as you review your data, you might wonder, considering that the 2024 California dashboard, like CASP or graduation rates, may not fully reflect the impact of your 24-25 actions, how can your LEA demonstrate the effectiveness of those actions despite the time gap between the implementation and when the results appear on the dashboard? Well, take a moment to think about what local data from this current year you have available. Although not required, LEAs are encouraged to consider current local data sources that may provide more timely and meaningful insights into effectiveness or ineffectiveness of your actions in the 24-25 school year. So we're going to recap. Remember, for goal analysis prompt 3, all actions must be addressed, but not all metrics may need to be discussed. When assessing effectiveness of the LEA-wide or school-wide actions that are contributing to the requirement of increased or improved services, LEAs must use the metrics associated with the actions identified in the increased or improved services sections of the LCAP. And consider your current local data that may present a better insight to evaluate the effectiveness or the ineffectiveness of the actions for the 24-25 school year. And remember, we have our LCAP resource page with sample responses, sample metrics, and other resources to help you with the development of the 25-26 LCAP. Thank you, everyone. And now I will turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Helen. And good morning, everyone. Next, we just have a few reminders regarding the LCAP submission and approval process. So this slide provides an overview of the components that make up the complete 2025-26 LCAP. And so this includes the budget overview for parents, the 25-26 LCAP template, the action tables, and the LCAP instructions. And so all components of the LCAP shown on this slide must be assembled as a single document in the order shown. And so that means when you take your plan to your board for adoption, and also when you post it on your LEA's website, it needs to be in a single document in the order shown. So once the LCAP has been developed with all of the required components, there are required steps that school districts must adhere to prior to adopting the LCAP. And please note that the steps on this slide also apply to charter schools that are using the LCAP as their SIPSA. So the full 25-26 draft LCAP must be presented to the Parent Advisory Committee and to the English Learner Parent Advisory Committee as applicable for review and comment. Additionally, the superintendent must respond in writing to all comments received from the PAC and the EL, Parent Advisory Committee. The LEA must also notify members of the public of the opportunity to submit written comments regarding proposed expenditures and actions in the LCAP. And so keep in mind that in order to do this, the public has to have the opportunity to view the draft LCAP. And then remember, the draft LCAP, it includes all of the components listed on the previous slide. So here we see the steps for board adoption and submission of the LCAP. So first, the LEA's local governing board must hold a public hearing for both the LCAP and the budget. And it's also important to note that the agenda for the public hearing must be posted at least 72 hours before the public hearing. Then the governing board must adopt the LCAP and the budget at a separate public meeting held after and not on the same day as the public hearing. And this must be on or before July 1st. And so also remember that the 2024-25 local indicator results must be presented to the governing board or body at the same meeting in which the LCAP is adopted. So not the public hearing, but the actual adoption meeting. And so districts must then submit the board adopted LCAP to the County Office of Education no later than 5 days after the adoption for review and approval. And charter schools must submit their adopted LCAP to their authorizer and the County Office of Education by July 1st. So as a reminder, all LEAs and charter schools in LA County will submit their 2025-26 LCAP using the LACO eLCAP system. And so again, for school districts, it must be submitted within 5 days of adoption. And for charter schools, it must be submitted by July 1st. And so if your LEA does not use the LACO eLCAP system to develop your LCAP, then you will just be uploading a PDF of your complete LCAP. And so again, the PDF that gets uploaded, it should be one single file with all of the components included on slide 56, and again, in that specific order. So here we just wanted to provide a quick reminder of how to upload and submit your LCAP for non-eLCAP users. So first, you would need to log into the eLCAP system, or if you don't already have an account, then you would need to register as a new user at elcap.laco.edu. And so once you're logged into the system, you'll click on Manage Plans, which is located on the left menu bar under LCAP. And on the next screen, you will select the orange button that says Add New Plan, and you can see this in step 3. So once you add a new plan, this title page that you see in step 4 will pop up. You'll need to complete the required fields on this page, and so that includes the plan title and year, the date of adoption, the LEA type and name, as well as the LEA contact information. And for the plan year, be sure to select 2025-26. At the bottom of the title page, you can see where you'll upload the PDF file of your complete LCAP. And so the system will only allow you to upload one file, so be sure that all of the LCAP components are included in that order previously mentioned. And so at the bottom of the title page, you will need to click on the box that says, do you want to use the PDF plan upload? And this will allow you to choose your file to upload. Once you've selected your file, then you will need to click on the green cloud button to upload the file. And once the upload has completed, the file name will replace the Choose File button, and then the next step will be to click the Save button. The final step, which you can see in step 6, is to officially submit the plan. So you would need to go back to the plan index where you will see an orange Submit button at the top of the screen. You will click on this button to officially submit the plan to LACO. So for those LEAs that use the eLCAP system to develop their LCAP, when the plan has been completed and adopted by the local governing board, you will officially submit the plan to LACO by just clicking on the orange Submit button at the top of the screen in the plan index as shown on this slide. And remember, after the plan is submitted, the status in ELCAP will change from draft to submitted. Your superintendent will then receive an email request to authorize the submission of the plan. And so once the superintendent authorizes the submission, the status will change to authorized, and then the formal review process will begin. Next slide. So Education Code 52070 provides the requirements and the timeline for the LCAP approval process for school districts. Again, the LCAP must be adopted by the local governing board by July 1st and then submitted to the county office within 5 days of adoption. The review and approval process will begin for school districts once the board adopted LCAP is submitted to LACO and authorized by the superintendent. Between the time the LCAP is officially submitted and through the beginning of August, school district LCAPs are reviewed thoroughly. And so if necessary, on or before August 15th, the County Office of Education will request in writing clarification of the contents of a school district's LCAP. Within 15 days of receipt of this clarification letter, the district shall respond in writing to the county office regarding these requests. Within 15 days of receiving the response from the district, the County Office of Education may provide recommendations in writing for amendments to the LCAP. And the district must then consider the recommendations in a public meeting within 15 days of receiving them from the COE. If a school district's LCAP and budget are approved by the County Office of Education by the end of August or early September, an approval letter will be sent to the governing board of a school district on or before September 15th. And so it's important to note that the district's budget cannot be approved until the LCAP is approved. And the deadline for the county office to approve a school district's LCAP is October 8th. So when reviewing the LCAP, there are 4 criteria that must be met for approval. And so first, it's that the LEA has adhered to the State Board of Education adopted template and has followed the instructions for completing the template. The second criteria we see on the slide is that the LEA budget for the upcoming fiscal year includes expenditures that are sufficient to implement the actions in the adopted LCAP. The third criteria is that the LEA has demonstrated how it is meeting its requirement to increase or improve services for students who are low income, English learners, or foster youth. And finally, that the LEA has made the required calculations to determine whether there is a carryover requirement in supplemental and concentration grant funds for unduplicated students and describes planned uses in the LCAP meeting its minimum proportionality percentage. Okay, so as a reminder, all LEAs must post their board-adopted LCAP on their website. And so for both school districts and charter schools, the LCAP must be posted, again, as one single document with all of the required components. And for school districts, remember, it's the LCAP that has been adopted by the governing board and approved by the County Office of Education that must be posted. Also remember that all revisions to the LCAP must be posted. And so that means that all of your previous LCAPs since 2014 should be posted in a prominent location on your webpage. And lastly, remember that school districts are also required to post the LCAPs of any charter school that they authorized on their district website. So next, we just wanted to provide a few dashboard reminders. So the reporting window for local indicators will be open from June 2nd through August 1st, 2025. And so remember, your local indicators will need to be presented to your local governing board as part of a non-consent item. And again, this is at the same meeting in which your LCAP is adopted on or before July 1st. And remember, when you report your local indicators to the dashboard, you will be asked to report this date. The next reminder is that the CDE will reset the 2024-25 Dashboard Coordinator database on Friday, August 15th at 5 p.m. So LEAs will be required to submit a new Dashboard Coordinator registration form for the 2025-26 school year beginning on August 18th. And so keep in mind that a new Dashboard Coordinator registration form must be submitted for the 2025-26 school year, even if your Dashboard Coordinator is not changing. And lastly, remember that LEAs are required to upload a PDF of the approved 2025-26 LCAP to the 2025 dashboard. And the window for this upload will open on October 13th and it will close on October 31st. And so that concludes the LCAP reminders. I will now turn it over to Adrian for some final reminders.
Thank you, Rachel. So we just have a few reminders. Some you've already heard earlier today with the CONAP spring release, and just knowing that certification deadline of June 30th. You heard today Prop 28 and those deadlines of June 30th, and also the annual report for September 30th. Also for the LCAP, you know that it needs to be submitted 5 days if you're an LEA, 5 days after the adoption, or charter schools by July 1st. And then we also just heard about the local indicators. We also wanted to remind you about the instructional continuity plan. And just a reminder that LEAs are required to have a comprehensive school safety plan that includes this by July 1st, 2025. And then also that reminder that the verification process will be done through the annual audit beginning in 25-26 school year. So again, planning for that and assuring all the parties that are involved in this are all aware of this change. And then lastly, the CalPADS end of year. Again, the certification deadline of July 25th, 2025. And now, as we close the end of the school year, we want to, again, we want to wish well all of those that have, been with us for a long time and are now going to be either promoted or are retiring. And so we want to do a special shout out to Kristen from Westside and Nancy and Gerard. We wish you well. Thank you for always being our partners and enjoying this journey of LCAP and state and federal programs. And anyone else who is retiring, we definitely would love to hear from you. If you put it in the chat, we can, congratulate you. And if there's any lotto winner, speak up. We need to rub elbows. So anyways, again, we just really thank you for all the support, and we've just really enjoyed being partners in all this work that is what's best for kids. And so we also want to ask that you fill out the end of the year survey. The end of the year survey is important for us. This one is different because we do ask you to reflect on the whole year and our meetings and our support. And if you don't have time today, rest assured we will be emailing you out the survey link along with the Q&A. And we also will be providing you the dates for next year's SFP meetings, the directors meeting. So we'll be providing that for you. Let's see, next slide, please. So again, you will, if you subscribe to our mailing list, you will be getting all the communications that we send out. If you have new members on your team, please pass on this mailing list, email the Zoom link the link so that they can sign up as well. And so again, we want to wish you a great summer. We want to thank you for a great year. And we know we will see you soon because as this year went by, so will summer. It will go by very fast. So that's it. So thank you again. We encourage you again to fill out the survey either through the QR code or pressing the link on the or in the chat. So thank you so much for all of what a great year we've had.